Welcome to Fields of Consciousness, a podcast for consciousness conversations with us, your host, Jeffrey Stegman.
And I'm Clayton Stedman.
As consciousness explorers and founders of Focused Life Force Energy, we're here to bring a holistic approach to consciousness and share practical examples of how you can take your life to the next level.
This episode is a little different. It's a webinar that we did live with an audience, where we dive into some of our research results from our Focused Life Force Energy research team. And what we discover is quite exciting. This episode also has a special meditation for you. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fields of Consciousness. Glad to have you with us. Today we'll be, as Clayton said, diving into some research. FLFE, or Focused Life Force Energy, is our business. Clayton and I started, Clayton, almost 8 years ago now. And we are committed to research on high consciousness fields, the benefits, the effects, what happens in a high consciousness field. And we'll be talking about that today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. This episode is a different layout. It's a recording from a live video webinar. There are some charts and visual research. So if possible, we suggest watching this episode on YouTube rather than listening. If you prefer listening on audio only, any charts or resources mentioned are in the show notes. We have a short meditation in the show notes as well for your enjoyment.
Dr. Gary Schwartz is back on the podcast with us to review these findings collected from the research on the FLFE high consciousness field. And the results are very exciting. We're excited to share it with you as well. And for those of you that missed the Luck and Synchronicities podcast with Gary, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that. So Gary Schwartz, PhD, is a professor of psychology, medicine, neurology, psychiatry, and surgery at the University of Arizona and director of its Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health. Gary received his PhD from Harvard in 1971 and was an assistant professor at Harvard, through 1976. He then served as a tenured professor of psychology and psychiatry at Yale University, and he was director of the Yale Psychophysiology Center and co-director of the Yale Behavioral Medicine Clinic before moving to the University of Arizona in 1988. So Gary's quite a prolific publisher. He's published 500 scientific papers, including 6 papers in the journal Science. He's co-edited 14 academic books, and he's the author of numerous books that I really enjoy. I've been reading a number of them lately. Super Synchronicity, that he released in 2017, relates to the podcast that we had previously. He's more recently published The Sacred Promise about science and spirituality and bridging the gaps. The Energy Healing Experiments, which was really interesting, about experiments related to energy healing, say, like Reiki and other things like that. Truth About Mediums, that was looking at mediums connecting to the other side, to those people that had passed over. Afterlife experiments related to that, and a book called The Living Energy Universe. All very, very interesting. So he's a fellow of the American Psychological Association. And so much more. And what's really interesting, and we really love his work in this area, is that Gary's a co-founder of the Academy for Advances in Post-Material Sciences. So again, that's, not being informed, but passing over into a post-material form, and served as its first president. So his research, and really so excited to have him part of the FLFE research team. His research integrates mind, body medicine, energy medicine, and spiritual medicine. And his current research focuses on the application of really innovative technologies for communicating with people that have physically passed over. It's called the Soul Phone. The organization is thesoulphone.org, if you want to look it up, and as well as advancing human consciousness and well-being.
Dr. Gary Schwartz is joining us today. Welcome, Gary.
Hello, everyone, and thank you. It's a privilege to be with you on this special day.
So for all of you scientifically minded people and research geeks, we will have an opportunity after Gary presents his data to ask about the research and how it was conducted, and dive even deeper into maybe some of the details that Gary is going to share with us, in addition to our answering questions about the FLFE service, as Jeff mentioned earlier. Gary is part of our research team at FLFE. The research team involves Gary and Lewis Humphreys, Paule Bellwood, Maria Colamy, Jeff, and myself. Gary was a recent guest on our podcast, Fields of Consciousness, and the topic was super synchronicities. So you can look that up if you would like to hear more about Gary's philosophy of life, and share a few laughs with us. So we have questions and comments for us in the Q&A. Maria and perhaps Aditi will be responding in the chat as much as they can to answer your questions there for you. If we have time, we'll answer questions from that ourselves, and we'll perhaps have conversations with you as you'll be able to put your hands up personally.
So it's good to have you all with you again. And we've got just under 200 people with us right now, which is great. And yeah, I love seeing where you're from in the chat. Everywhere from Asheville, North Carolina to Spain to California to all over Canada. It's great to see those. So again, as Clayton said, after the meditation and the rest of the program, including Gary's presentation on some of our latest FLFE research, we'd love to hear from you. We always love to hear your comments and questions and discussions. It's always really great. In fact, we get so carried away talking to you all that the last couple of webinars, we haven't gone into the Q&A and answered those questions. So we're going to try to do that today. But we just love talking to you. A quick reminder, we're in a 700 consciousness field during this webinar. Each of you listening, people that are listening, there's a field activated. So you might consider drinking up. I was going to raise my cup, but drinking lots of hydrating liquids and magnesium and essential fatty acids, you could consider taking afterwards.
So we are going to do a short FLFE community meditation today. We intend to develop a community meditation practice during webinars on a regular basis, and we're working on a kind of a script for that so that we have a basis to go from. As you may have experienced, there is more power in a high consciousness field to manifest intentions. So as we go through this meditation, there may be something that you're intending to bring into your life that you can focus on. You also may have discovered that you can direct the FLFE energy for beneficial purposes, and we may include that in our meditations today and in the future.
So some of you may have seen our podcast, Fields of Consciousness. We had Gary on as a guest talking about synchronicities. And so it's a great one to see. It's a two-part podcast. But what I was reminded of in that podcast was just how consciousness seems to be the structure, the underlying structure of everything. And these seemingly impossible or extremely improbable multiple synchronicities that we talked about there, and many of you may also connect into synchronicities, which we sort of came to the conclusion it's one of the languages of the divine speaking to us through synchronicities. But there's an enormous scale in which reality is bent or affected for all these synchronicities to happen and all these things to come together, triggered by our consciousness. It's just a reminder of the power of our consciousness and the power of our intention, and coming together in these FLFE community meditations. It's an opportunity to direct that along with the FLFE energy to make a difference in the world. And today we're going to do a relatively short one, as we have a lot to cover today and lots of treats in store.
The meditation is downloadable, linked in the show notes, for you to listen and enjoy. Share it with others if you like. If you are driving, please listen to the downloaded version when you are stationary in a place that you can close your eyes and relax.
Yeah, we put quite a high consciousness field on the meditation. So it's, why we recommend not driving, not operating heavy equipment of any kind. Just put yourself on a couch somewhere and enjoy it. All right, everyone, why don't we just settle into our seats and close our eyes for a moment. I'm going to ask for divinity, intelligent infinity, to flow energy through the realms, seen and unseen, into all of us, into this group now and those watching in the future. And as the energies gathering, we ask for a protocol of protection around all of us during this meditation. And in this energy and in the FLFE energy of your location or around your cell phone, in your mind, you could express gratitude for what you have, for all that you have. And we'll do that individually for 1 minute. Feel free to add anything you wish, Clayton. While holding that gratitude and continuing to feel it, let us form a circle. Everyone on this call, all 211 at this point, and those who join later and watch this later, we form a large circle. You could picture each of us facing inwards to the center of the circle. And in the center, shining like the brightest sun, is divinity, intelligent, infinity. And in this circle together, in this FLFE energy and this energy of each one of us joining the circle, there is a synergy, multiplying effect of each of us holding gratitude in our hearts and this shining light upon us. And just ask for you to notice you have a neighbor to your left. And in a clockwise fashion, share gratitude to your left, to your neighbor to your left. Each of us sharing gratitude to our left, and then to the person, second person, to the third. And we're sharing gratitude in a huge circle of all of us. And the FLFE energy, or direct the FLFE energy to move in this clockwise fashion, to amplify the gratitude and the positive effects of receiving gratitude from our neighbor to the right. And it's bathing our body, mind, and spirit with gratitude. And we're passing it on. With the bright light of divinity in the center, shining and amplifying as well. The circle of gratitude. Now, if you wish, you could bring your loved ones, your family, anyone you wish, into the circle so that they may receive this gratitude bath and this shining light of divinity for whatever they need. Picture this energy, this light, ever brighter and moving around the circle. This is the gratitude bills. And those in the center we've chosen to bring in, filled with light, love, and gratitude. Now let us move the earth. Just picture the earth moving into the circle. We're just allowing this energy to just go to wherever it's needed the most, and to whoever it's needed the most. I'll let you wrap it up, Clayton, when you see fit.
As we see the earth receiving the shared good that we have created together between ourselves, the members of the community, your friends and family, and whoever else you've called into the circle. And now that we've blessed the earth and thanked it for all that it gives us, for all the material things in life, for all of our food and clothing and shelter, then we offer up this abundance to the entire universe, to all of creation, trusting that there is an intelligence in this place that we share, this co-created space that we're in, that will send this abundance out to wherever it needs to go in all of creation. Now we are going to turn that light back inward again, noticing that we are full, that our cup is overflowing with good. We take the energetic image of the earth and let it go back to the place that it needs to. We thank our friends and family and others that we called into the circle and ask that they energetically go back to wherever they need to be. We step back out of the circle, perhaps noticing somebody that we recognize. We are now an individual, the light of divinity still shining on all of us. And we notice we are coming back into our bodies, our feet on the floor. We notice our body in a chair. If we are in a chair, we are energized. We are happy. And we are resourced in whatever way we need to take the next conscious steps in our lives, moving forward from this abundant state. I invite you to open your eyes as you notice your breathing. And noticing the peace in our bodies as we continue on today. Okay.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you to everyone in the circle, now and in the future.
We have a World LOC update, Jeff.
That would be great. Yeah, I'm trying to bring it back into
the 3D here.
Yes. Thanks so much. I can share a screen here in a moment and
okay.
Do you want to
I'll
give a
start
little
us off
intro?
on that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that many people have told us they find interesting is for us to give a report on the level of consciousness of the planet, a couple of countries on the planet, and relate it to current circumstances in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives us a chance to explore the relationship between levels of consciousness and events in society, which does remind us that we're co-creators and that the world we live in is of our, we'll say, imagination and efforts. So because we're data people, we like data. So we put numbers to the measurements. And for those of you unfamiliar with our work, we use the Hawkins map of consciousness to measure these influences on the planet. If you go on to, I think it's a veritas.pub, that is Dr. Hawkins' body of work is on there. We are not associated with Dr. Hawkins in any way other than being students of his. And we just wanted to let you know what reference we are using when we measure this. These graphs and presentations will be added into the show notes. So whenever you're ready, Jeff, if you have that chart, you could bring that up and I'll share some numbers. Okay. So you can see some historical perspective here. We're going to focus on the last 4 months on the chart. You can see that it goes back to the fall of 2019. You can see what happened when COVID was announced in March. Down into April, we dropped to the lowest level of consciousness that the planet has been at since literally the Middle Ages. And then we've come back up and we've had an event that we thought was worth mentioning, which was the US Capitol event. I think that was January 5th, 6th, and 7th, if I remember correctly. And you can see where the world was at a certain level of consciousness and the United States went to 150. Well, the world at that time was over 200 on the Hawkins map. And this is on average over the month so that's January 2021. 200 is courage, 200 is integrity on the Hawkins map of consciousness, 150 is anger. So when you have an event such as the US Capitol event, whatever you want to frame that as, a society will go into turmoil. Down at 100, you have fear. That is, you can see in April 2020, the world was primarily at fear as we didn't know the effects of COVID and what it would do. And then, of course, the US, as most countries do, they rise quicker. A smaller system will typically rise quicker than a larger system. So the US started going up quite quickly. The world stabilized over 200. And then we had the conflict in Ukraine. I think it was the 24th of February, if I'm correct.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't quote me on that. Okay, that's correct. So you can see where the world, again, went just down to about 150, around 150 to 180. And that's basically the effect of conflict in the world. The world goes to anger as we're uncertain, frustrated, and afraid of what might happen.
And Clayton, that is the average for the month, and the actual on those days of February 24th, 25th, and 26th, the world went to 100 or fear, yes. And the US was at 150. So for those 3 days, the rest of the month was much higher. So that was the average that we see on the chart.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Jeff. There's only so much data you can put in these charts. So we're trying to create a historical perspective. And so that just gives us an idea of the impact of world events and how that might affect our individual consciousness. And then you can see the USA starting to climb again as we're at least settled with the level of conflict over there and where it's progressing. It's not what we would like, of course, but there is a certain settledness that comes with something over time as the amount of fear typically is diminished because we're seeing a pattern of behavior that we assume is going to project into the future. Now, other countries in the world might parallel this very closely depending on their foreign policy and their involvement in Ukraine. If we did this with the world and Ukraine, you can imagine Ukraine would be much lower. There may have been times, well, there were times in Ukraine that the country was at 50 out of 1,000 for at least several days, which is sort of in the despair level of consciousness. So, we could spend a lot of time going into detail about data, but we just wanted to give you an update and share a perspective that many of you have found helpful from what you've told us. So I'm just looking at our notes on this, Jeff, and I didn't go into the level of detail that is in the notes, but I feel that's pretty complete. Does that seem good to you?
Yeah, I feel good. And we do have a PIF on Ukraine and, doing our best on the energetic side. And in a previous webinar, we did a meditation to raise the level of consciousness of the country. So we thought we'd move into the FLFE research. I wanted to give a short introduction, a review of the FLFE research. So we're looking into high consciousness fields. What are the effects? What are the benefits of high consciousness fields? We're doing research with plants. This research project we're talking about today is with the FLFE subscribers. And we have substantial resources of the company going into this research. And it's to support FLFE and, evidence for what we're doing here, but it's also to explore the implications of high consciousness fields, of consciousness fields in general. And there's, with Gary's help and Lewis and Paulet and Maria, there's quite a lot of research projects, lined up that are very exciting. We'll introduce those as we move into those. But it's all furthering the FLFE mission of supporting the optimal conditions for the evolution of consciousness. So, in that, we're activating a field, a high consciousness field with the service. Its purpose is, to support the evolution of consciousness. And, we're one of the sidebar, we're starting to call, I love using sidebar now, Gary, I'm sorry, it's your term, but it's a good way to signal, here comes a diversion. But we're calling the FLFE service for seekers, because we do find that many people are seekers in this situation means people that are consciously on the evolutionary path. And we find that many of our subscribers are very, you could say, veterans and really consciously and vigorously on that path. And we see a lot of really, really wise and interesting things on the private Facebook page. And there's other benefits to being in the FLFE high consciousness field, which we'll discuss in this research. And this research really came from the community, from you all, from your spontaneous testimonials, phone calls, Facebook posts, and emails. And that really was the start of this research. And I should mention that, we're in which I've heard you call, Gary, frontier research, where it's really kind of out ahead. And, much of what we're working with is the benefits without having all the theories in mainstream science that would explain it. So we're developing what we call a gold standard of research, and Gary will talk a little bit about that brings a high level of rigor to our FLFE research projects because of the nonlinear nature of the service and the benefits that we're seeing, and that we really need to develop a very high standard that we could then share with other companies like FLFE or other services or other products where they are also in the nonlinear realm of, the frontiers. With that, I think I'll pass it to you, Gary. Unless there's something else you would like to say, Clayton. Sorry.
For those of you who may be here for the first time, the PIF that Jeff mentioned is a free service that we offer to subscribers. When you purchase a subscription, we give you a lower level of consciousness free service with no programs on it for as long as we own the company. And we made some adjustments in our machines, and we put the entire country of Ukraine on temporarily. So we're not sure how long we can leave that on, but just for those of you who were wondering what that PIF was, we are making an extraordinary effort to help Ukraine at this time in the ways that we can. So I should probably say something nice about you as well, Gary.
You don't have to.
Yeah, Gary is, Gary's a scientist, but other than considering him my friend, the thing I most respect about Gary is a spiritual seeker. And he has the courage to, and I think the resourcefulness to explore some of these nonlinear technologies that he's certainly involved in with his own body of work and with ours. And so when we were looking for somebody to help us quantify and standardize our way of vetting the service so that we can serve people whose minds may want that type of information so that they can relax into at least trying it. Gary was the guy that kept coming up. And so we're really glad to have you, Gary. Thank you for what you've done for us so far.
My privilege. Well, what's very special today is that we have major data that justifies your enthusiasm for all this and everybody else's. And it's a privilege to be able to share it. Would you like me to start?
Please.
Okay. So what I have to do to make sure that we've got this correct is get the right screen up, and we'll see whether this works. I say share. And once we do that, then we'll know that we're okay. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm. Looks good.
And
yes,
what we want to do is now also go back here to the beginning. Okay. I'd like to just make a couple of introductory remarks, if I might. First of all, by saying that I really want to thank Clayton and Jeff for not only inspiring all of this, but making it possible to share all of this with people who really care about hearing it. And this today is a special day because it's the first time where I think you're going public with this initial stage of this work. So I want to honor that specialness. The second is that besides thanking everyone on the team, it's a really quite an extraordinary team doing extraordinary research. I'd also like to actually dedicate this to two people. One person is Professor William James from Harvard University, who lived over a century ago. And he was a physician and a philosopher who also bridged science and spirituality. And he was, so to speak, the grandfather of American psychology and a core leader in the birthing of psychology at a global level. And he was a hero of mine. In fact, I had the privilege to do my PhD in William James Hall, named after William James, at Harvard. And one of William James's many wonderful ideas was his devotion to what he called radical empiricism. And radical empiricism is the idea that you not be afraid to ask questions and then follow the data where it takes you. And I would like to honor him today because he's part of the inspiration for me to have the courage to do this kind of work. The other person I'd like to honor is someone whose name is Miles Stegman, who people in FLE know well. Miles has been an inspiration for ongoing research with the research team, particularly the plant research. And he suddenly, I think probably for most of us, unexpectedly transitioned a few weeks ago. And although he may have passed on, he has not passed away. And I am honored in part to be able to share this with his consciousness clearly in my mind and heart. And I hope for some of you, his as well. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, what do we mean by the gold standard in these what we call 4 phases of research? And very briefly, phase 1 research is, and I should explain, by the way, that these phases have been used in various ways by various organizations, including, for example, biomedical research and also psychological research involving treatment outcomes. And it can easily be applied to any area, including any kind of service work. And in phase 1 research, you're doing exploratory research. It's typically small scale, but it can have even large numbers. And it addresses the question, does carefully collected user evidence suggest that a given service works? In other words, do people actually reporting things that are beneficial to them? It doesn't tell us how it works, but it justifies then seeking further research. Now, if positive findings are obtained, then we have phase 2 research, which is confirmatory and parametric research, typically also small scale, addressing the question, do laboratory and controlled experiments support the user evidence and also verify safety? Now, if positive findings are obtained here, which includes, by the way, working on understanding how it works as opposed to that it works, then we move on to what's called phase 3 research. Now, this is very large-scale research, typically in, for example, the pharmacological industry or in other large-scale service providers, where you address the question, do controlled, multi-center, multi-blinded, randomized controlled trials replicate the phase 2 experiments in terms of efficacy and safety? And then if positive findings are obtained here, then some people do what's called phase 4 research, where you have real-life validation experiments, typically large scale, addressing the question, are positive findings obtained observing in the phase 3 research replicated in large-scale usage in real life? Because sometimes, for example, something can be observed when you do research on it, but then the effects are different when it's observed in real life. And FLFE, as a visionary company, has the potential with these goals in mind to be able to address all 4 types of research in an ever spiraling, evolving kind of way. Now, FLFE customers provide a wealth of spontaneous accounts of positive experiences with FLFE on the FLFE website as well as on the Facebook page. By the way, can you see my cursor? Is that on the screen?
Yes.
That's wonderful, because then I can point. So what were the four purposes of this retrospective phase 1 research? Purpose number 1 was to develop an instrument, which we call the Customer Experience Survey, that could easily and effectively assess frequently reported benefits of FLFE. Now think about this. Where are these FLFE benefits coming from? They're being reported by users. This is user-generated, experience-generated research. It is the claims that you who are listening make as you've been on the service. Purpose 2 is to evaluate the degree of benefits in a representative sample of FLFE customers using a validated scale. Purpose number 3 is to explore the replicability of the degree of positive effects from FLFE as a function of gender or age and years of FLFE participation. That was the first step in this work. And then finally, purpose 4 is to examine the relationship between expectation of benefits from less than expected to more than expected and degrees of positive experiences reported, which you'll see was added in step 7 below. Now, one of the things I should say is that when you engage in radical empiricism, when you work at the frontiers, when you're willing to follow the data where it takes you, one of the great lessons is to be prepared for surprises. It's also part of the great fun of being a seeker, seeking information. And you're going to see there are a couple of, I would say, extraordinary surprises that are about to be revealed. Okay. So let me give you the summary of the 4 findings so that you can see the big picture, and then we're going to take you through each one in what they call the deep dive. So you're going to see lots of scientific data plus data that's been restructured by Maria and also Paula to make it easy for us to be able to see and understand. So the findings for purpose 1 is that the CES, the Customer Experience Survey, was found to be successful in easily and effectively assessing frequently reported FLFE customer experiences. We succeeded in doing that. Then findings for purpose 2, the majority of FLFE customers report high rates of positive experiences across each of the 16 individual benefits that comprise the questionnaire we developed, replicating and extending spontaneous testimonials. Findings for purpose number 3 is that these positive findings, importantly, were replicated across age, gender, and years using FLFE, with a slight proviso there, you'll see. And findings for purpose number 4 is that the majority of FLFE customers reported that the benefits of FLE were greater than they expected. Think about this. You who are filled out these questionnaires ended up indicating that for many of you, your experiences were greater than you expected. And these individuals also reported the highest levels of positive experiences with FLFE. So, what were the 8 steps we used for creating, pilot testing, and conducting the FLFE CES Phase 1 research? Briefly, step 1, approximately 4 years of spontaneous accounts of benefits were entered in verbatim into an Excel spreadsheet. Then 2 word frequency account analyses were performed and word cloud graphs were examined to see how the content and concepts were structured. 3, a set of frequently reported benefits were selected by senior FLFE members and carefully crafted into questions that were easy to read and rate. Step 4, additional questions regarding expectations, age, gender, and time using FLFE were created for a total of 20 questions. Then in step 5, we did a pilot experiment, the first one of 5 people. The original CES one was taken by 5 executives and senior FLFE staff members under 2 conditions. First, the items were rated based on their own personal experiences with FLFE. And 2, items were rated again based on their predictions regarding how representative consumers would answer the questions. In the process, improvements in the wording specific benefits were made. So you do an initial pilot study. Then we did a second pilot study with a larger N, and 14, The modified CES, which is number 2, is then beta tested using FLFE staff. Additional modifications of wording and questions were made as indicated. Then step number 3, we did a pilot study with N of 52 people. Now that's already starting to move into something that we can draw decent conclusions about, is something working. This version was announced on the FLFE website and answered by approximately, as he said, 52 customers. After analyzing the data, it was decided to add the expectation question and also create 6 subcategories of benefits to make it easier to grok or understand the information in terms of physical items, mental items, emotional, personal, social, nature, and spiritual. And then step A, we now have a representative retrospective phase 1 study, total of 338 people filled out all these questions. So now it's on Facebook, and from there we have this data. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to include graphs that you'll see in the summaries of the quick look that Maria has so beautifully reported, but then give you the scientific data and the detailed graphs that show how these summary graphs were made. So you can see, for example, it's very easy to tell that using the 4 categories of under 20, age 21 to 40, age 41 to 60, and age 61 to 90, you can look at the color coding and you can see what the approximate percentage or numbers of people were in each category. So there's a fairly large distribution of age. You can also see in terms of males and females that the females were clearly more represented than males, which is, I think, my understanding of that's the way the service is in general. Now, what were the 16 items and the 6 subcategories of FLFE reported benefits? So I'm going to take you through each of the items so you can think about how you experienced these, the degree to which you experienced them. And they were rated, by the way, from 1, which essentially was never or not at all, to 5, which is very often. And we were talking about frequency of noticing these changes. For the physical items, we have how often have you experienced more physical energy? And a second one is how often have you experienced more restful sleep? These numbers over here are actually where the questions fell in the order that they were presented and that you filled them out, as opposed to the questionnaire didn't present them in this order, which means they were, quote, scrambled. Mental items, by contrast, were how often have you experienced more mental clarity? And how often have you experienced that it's easier to notice a negative thought and move it to a more positive thought? This item becomes very important because it was also one of the most frequently reported benefits. Then in the emotional category, we have 3 items. How often have you noticed more joy, laughter, or fun for those in the FLFE environment? 9, how often have you experienced a relief from anxiety? And the 12 here was, how often have you noticed that it's easier to find forgiveness? Again, one that I was surprised that came up so frequently in terms of experience change. I say I was surprised because I wasn't thinking of this in terms of high consciousness fields, because that becomes a prediction. Then we have personal and social items. How often have you noticed improvements in communication among those around you in the FLFE environment? How often have you noticed more ease and flow in everyday life? How often have you noticed positive changes in overall quality of life? How often have you noticed engaging less in perceived bad habits? How often have you experienced breakthroughs or seen bigger life changes? And again, I remind you, where did these items come from? They came from you. This is all based on your spontaneous testimonials, which we then formalized in the instrument. Then we have 2 items that relate to nature, which I have a pet interest in, no pun intended, which is how often have you noticed a change in the vitality or growth of your houseplants, which of course requires that you have houseplants if you're going to see a change. And then how often have you noticed the presence of abundant wildlife beyond what you normally experienced? Again, it helps if you're living out in the country or have abundant wildlife that could appear. And finally, spiritual, some of you, and many of you may be particularly interested in this, I happen to be one of those people. How often have you experienced easier or deeper meditations or feel more connected overall? And finally, how often have you seen or experienced more synchronicities of any kind that hold relevance to you personally. So those are the 16 items. So now we're going to get to like numbers. Okay. Purpose number 1, is the 16-item CES a reliable instrument? And one of the ways scientists check reliability is they look to see to which a given item is correlated with other items in an instrument. So you see we have 16 items going across here in the order that they occurred. These are the rows. Well, down. So these are the columns. And then there are rows. And of course, the rows are also the items. Now, what is a correlation? A correlation is the extent to which two sets of numbers are related to each other. And the maximum they can be related is 100%, perfection, which in statistics terms is called a 1. If there's no relationship, the number is a 0. And if they're inversely related, they're out of phase, for example, you have a -1. So the numbers range from -1 to +1. Now you'll notice all these 1s down here in the darker number. The reason is that when an item is correlated with itself, it better be perfect. This is one of the ways you know your statistics program is working, is that the item correlates well with itself. Once you know it correlates well with yourself, then you can look to see whether to what extent do people who report increase in physical energy, do they report increase in mental clarity or joy or fun or restful sleep and so on. And the thing that's amazing about these data is that the numbers are all typically above 50.5, and they go up to 0.7, even to 0.8. These numbers are highly statistically significant. So every item correlates with every other item. So if you want to create an instrument of overall perceived benefit, it passes one of the first criteria for looking at. Now, you can do this in a more sophisticated way by looking at, for example, what's called split half reliability and something called for example, the Cronbach's alpha. And again, this number can be from 0 to 0.1. Anything that's typically around 0.8 or so, you're really quite happy with. The CES was 0.969, which is really excellent for an instrument to justify its use. And if you also look at what's called split half reliability, looking in terms of the first and second half of the items, and you look at what's called the Gutman split half reliability or other measures, you see they're clearly above 9, anywhere from 9.5 to 9.7. So we have some confidence now in knowing that, at least in terms of the internal consistency of the scale that we created, that it holds together sufficiently well to justify using it to assess people's experiences. You also want to look at when we create the subscales, or when we talked about physical, mental, emotional, personal, nature, and spiritual, and we, again, have the columns and the rows. Again, everything's correlated with everything, which, by the way, had better be the case if each of the individual items were correlated with each other. And so, again, this provides further consistency and confidence. So we now move on to purpose number 2. Do a majority of respondents report positive benefits with FLFE? And the answer is clearly yes. If we take the items, and the ratings, as you know, are from none or minimal, which are numbers of 1 and 2, or some items, some benefit, which is a rating of 3, versus a substantial benefit, which is a rating of 4 and 5. And then you classify each person in terms of their average rating across the 16 items. You can see that 57.86%, i.e. around 58% of people report substantial benefits. 23.48% report some benefits, and only 18.7% report no or minimal benefits. So if you were looking to see whether some or substantial benefits, you're talking about more than 80% of the 338 people who answered this question reported positive benefits. Now, of course, you would think that people who would care enough to fill out a questionnaire are going to be people who care about FLFE and might report positive benefits. the fact that we see a clear, small, but nonetheless representative sample of people reporting minimal or no benefits gives us confidence that the data are real. Because nothing works for everyone. And also, there are other factors why people might not report benefits if benefits are there to be found. For example, you get habituated to good things and then you stop noticing them. It's a standard phenomena that many people experience. So all of this suggests we want to do more research. And this is a plot of those means. And I want you to look at the shape of this curve because this shape is repeated over and over again. So for example, by the way, like Clayton and Jeff, I really love data. And so when I get into data, and I like to look at it thoroughly and completely. So in my quote, I would say obsessive seeking of information from data, not wanting to waste a single possible gem, and honoring the fact that people have given their time and energy into filling out these questionnaires, I will analyze, and I'm just displaying how the data came out. So look at this. This is a plot of the average for every single item. All 16 items are individually plotted on this graph. Excel is so nice because it makes it much prettier than my statistics packages. But anyway, you can see that every item shows this general effect. This is a pattern that shows for every single item. So we know that whatever this effect is, and it's clearly there, it's something that is highly repeated across the items. Now, purpose 3, do the majority of respondents reporting positive benefits replicate across gender? The answer is clearly yes. When we split them, the subjects into male, people who reported being males versus people who reported being females, there were other people who didn't report their gender, so didn't include them. You can see that both males and females show the identical trend. So this is not just due to female participants with FLFE. This is, for the sample as a whole, applies to both men and women. Purpose number 3 also, do the majority of respondents reporting positive benefits replicate across age? The answer is yes. So here I have 5 age groups, which I originally separated into the categories of less, 33 years or less, 34 to 45, 34 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and above 65. And you can say, why did I do that when we had the earlier one where only 4 age groups? And the reason is because I was attempting to split the data so that we had fairly comparable and large numbers in each of the groups. So going up to age 33, we had an N of 30. And then getting to the next category, we have an N of 61. So these are sufficiently large enough that each of the curves are valid. And notice, irrespective of age, the effects are the same. So older people get benefit, not just younger people, old in Earth years. Okay, purpose number 3 again. Do the majority of respondents reporting positive benefits replicate across length of using FLFE? Yes, with a minor exception here. Now, plotting the data this way is not the clearest way to see the results, as you'll see when Maria does her beautiful ways of integrating the data. But if you split people into less than 3 months, 3 months to 12 months, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, or greater than 3 years, which are these 5 groups, and you can see that less than 3 months, the N was 121, whereas 3 to 12 months was N of 107. The smallest group was greater than 3 years, that is filling out the sample, not surprising, N of 30. You can see all 4 groups show this effect. They showed the same trend, but one group showed a much smaller trend here. And that's the group that were less than 3 months. So the less than 3 months group are showing some effects, not as large as what happens when you go from 3 months to 1 year. Now, again, before we jump to any conclusions about interpretation, right now we're just in the radical empiricism. We're looking at the data. Later, we can talk about, well, how might we explain these data? what else would we do to be able to replicate, to be sure that these data are in fact the right, are an accurate generalization, and so on. So I share these results. Now, these are the same data, but replotted by Maria. And you can see here now, what's called the y-axis is the percent scores, and on the x-axis we now have years in the service. And it's very easy to see that as you go along in the service, most people are reporting obviously the high benefits, and then you've got some benefits here, and it really trails off by the time you get 3 years in terms of people not reporting anything. Again, we're not putting an interpretation on this, but you can also see that this is where the first 3 months. But it's just a beautiful curve. It's aesthetically pretty, and the data are also really nice. Okay, now purpose number 4: can the expectation of FLFE effectiveness explain the experience of FLFE benefits? In other words, if we were going to go from is something happening to the first question that anyone wants to ask, whether you're a skeptic or not. But if you're a true seeker and you want to know why is this happening, you want to know whether or not is people's expectations what determines the outcome. So we included, because this was a retrospective study, we included an item where people filled out whether the results that they experienced were less than expected, or were the results the benefits that they experienced as they anticipated, or were they greater than expected? And I, as someone who is, if you would, the person who's supposed to approach all of this with as little pre-bias or pre-experience as possible, so I can look at the data afresh. I, for one, and I think many others were surprised that the people who reported that the effects were greater than they expected when they started the program, that represents 2/3 of the people who reported. Which means what? They couldn't have had very high expectations, because if they had very high expectations, it couldn't have been greater than expected. And again, we don't know because we didn't collect those data, but you could be sure we will in the next survey as we progress in the research. You really want to be able to get what the pre-values are starting ahead of time, as opposed to memory, to see how that relates to outcome. But the only way you can get these results is if many people were unsure about whether the results were positive or negative. So there could be some room for surprise. And if you notice here, not only were 2/3 of the sample were the results greater than expected, and a good 17% were as expected, but only about 16% of the people reporting who filled out the questionnaire reported it as being less than the expected. And if you look now at their ratings of perceived benefits, in this case, on each of the subscales, the physical, the mental, emotional, personal, nature, and spiritual, i.e., these are 6 categories as opposed to all 16 items, you can see the results as clear as day. The people who were where the findings were greater than expected, their perceived benefits, they were the people who reported the highest benefits. Mm. So if you're going to be surprised, isn't it nice to be surprised with strongly positive benefits? Okay. Now, these are the same data regraphed by Maria. And of course, they're really easy to see it in this fashion. But people have more. These are the real numbers now from which these graphs were then created. So now you have access to both of those graphs. Now, this gets to be a little complicated, but I was told that enough of you who are listening want to get into a nitty-gritty so that I'll give you at least one thing that's a little complicated so you could ponder this. And that is, can expectation of FLFE effectiveness explain experience of FLFE benefits? Again, I say no. Again, we've seen the same value ratings that we said before in terms of the percentage here. But now what I want to do is I want to graph these in terms of people who reported minimal and no benefits, some benefits, or substantial benefits. Now, if we look at the group which was greater than expected, you'll notice that over 80% of these people reported clearly substantial benefits. Another 12% reported some benefits, and virtually none of them reported no benefits, or minimal or no benefits. Not surprisingly, the people who are who experienced things less than expected, the predominance of these people reported minimal benefits. And some of them reported, obviously, some benefits, but relatively few reported, now this is a very small n, reported only minimal benefits. If it was as was expected, notice the peak is in the middle. It's where it's either less on either substantial or minimal. These are the data. They look complicated until you explain them. But they're, again, they, quote, make sense. And this is just the summary, remembering that these items are all highly reliable, but these break into this when we look at the in a more sophisticated fashion. Now, here's the last bit of data, and I was really surprised again about this. What happens if we rank order the items in terms of items where people reported the least benefits for those that were reporting the most benefits? We look at the items and see how they line up. Is there any trend? Is there any pattern? Is there any structure? Is it teaching us anything about FLFE? And I plotted them separately for those who reported where the benefits were greater than expected, and then I'll show you the other two, as expected and then below expected. Notice, sort of not surprisingly, the average was least reported for abundant wildlife and vital plants. But again, if you don't have plants, you're not going to see many changes. And if you don't have a lot of wildlife, so unless you have data about people's locales and the number of plants they have in their house, you can't interpret this number. But what is interesting here is restful sleep and physical energy. People did not report as highly benefits. I mean, clearly reporting benefits, but it's not nearly as high as the items that were the most stellar. And those most stellar of highest items, which I will emphasize here, is improvement in overall quality of life, capacity to express forgiveness, and the ease of shifting from negative to positive thoughts and actions. This is the kind of change that I think many people would like in their lives. Now, the question is this pattern only present if you have benefits that are greater than expected? So, of course, you know me now. I had to look at the data. Anyway, here's the data. Now, again, the scale is lower. So these numbers are lower, obviously. 3 is, as you know, the moderate range for experiencing positive symptoms. But look at the graph. The shape is virtually identical. Abundant and relief of anxiety and breakthroughs are down here. Physical energy is still down here. And notice what's highest up here: forgiveness, negative to positive. Quality of life is down a little bit more. Improved communication is up here. But the general trend of these items is very similar. If we now look at the people where the benefits were less than expected, I think this needs to be reversed. Anyway, you'll notice here the ratings are now lowest. Again, abundant wildlife, physical energy, interesting, joy and fun are lower. But look what's up here again, highest again. Even among people who reported benefits less than what they expected, forgiveness and negative to positive, and also deep meditation was up there. So there is some pattern here yet to be understood, which may make sense to some of you, which is telling us there's something real going on here. Now, again, we can thank Maria for this, but she's plotted it in a much cleaner and prettier way for this total sample as a whole. So you can see that for all the people together, forgiveness, negative, positive, and deeper meditation, you can see this are clearly the highest compared to the lowest. And that's a very aesthetically pretty and also intellectually pretty graph. Finally, she's created a graph here where every single item in the order that they were filled out is listed in terms of less than, as expected, or better than expected. So you can see the whole thing in one clear graph. So what are the conclusions that we can reach from this phase 1 retrospective exploratory is something happening data set? What can we draw from this? Conclusion number 1, it is possible to measure 16 commonly reported benefits from FLFE using a standardized questionnaire or survey. Conclusion number 2, the majority, as we said, 58% approximately of respondents in a relatively large sample. We say relatively large sample because that's a lot of people. It's not a huge number in terms of the total customer base of FLFE, but it's large for an initial exploratory phase 1 experiment for this work. Report experiencing these benefits, an additional approximately 23% report experiencing some benefits. Only 18.66% of the respondents report minimal or no benefits. Conclusion number 3, these substantial effects are replicated across genders and ages. They're also replicated across people experiencing the FLF service for 3 months or longer, extending beyond 3 years. That's clearly the case. Conclusion number 4, these substantial experience benefits cannot be explained as being a simple placebo effect. This is not just if you believe you're going to have, it's more than belief. The majority, 67% of approximately the respondents reported that their experience of benefits were greater than they expected, implying that they were surprised by these positive observations and experiences. Only 7.5% reported that the FLFE users were as they expected, while 15.97% indicated the effects were less than they expected. And therefore, conclusion number 5 altogether, the findings from this large-scale retrospective phase 1 experiment support the claim made by customers that FLFE is having positive effects for a majority of users, and that phase 2 research, i.e. to do the kind of research that gets at mechanisms of action and gets at the conditions for optimally getting effects and so on, that doing this kind of research, extending this research, including how FLFC works, is justified. FLFE provides a summary conclusion. I'm not even going to give you that soundbite here. I think I'm going to close this down for reasons that I would like to explain. And then I will pass the baton back to Clayton and Jeff, who have been very patient listening to this evidence. And that is that unless one collects systematic data on the very foundation of a service, which is whether people are experiencing positive benefits or not, there is little justification for doing more extensive research or in trying to understand how it works. Particularly when, in order to understand how it works, you have to integrate things that, quote, go outside the box of conventional thinking. And therefore, putting the time and energy into quantifying the people's experiences and becoming clear about that it's truly fundamental. And I'm very proud that that FLFE is committed to that purity of effort and that foundational of effort. And also, for those of you who are hearing this, who either yourself are skeptical, and it's good to be skeptical. To be a seeker is to ask questions. So skeptical is wonderful, to be asking questions. But in the future, since the people who you know might think, well, maybe you're a little odd, sort of what the heck are you doing thinking about this stuff and participating in this, you can now say, well, they're actually collecting data on the fundamental nature of the idea that there's something real here. And if you go to the website or you watch this webinar, you can find out. And so if this helps you in terms of your living trying to live a more evolved life and grow and help your loved ones, the people you know, be with you on this journey as well, then hopefully these data will be of that service.
Thank you, Gary. It's your excitement on the numbers is infectious, and it's and it's really.
I'm just sharing my feelings. That you can't make these data. Well, you could make the data up, but I couldn't have. And you can't make up the enthusiasm. And I apologize for interrupting, but thank you.
No, yeah, it's great. Yeah, and it the way it's laid out really does help bring new insights to the fore, which I love. Is you keep looking and asking questions as you analyze it. There's a couple of things came up to mind for me. It's the less than 3 months. Having less benefits showing up there, and the way we designed the free trial, being 2 weeks, was to try to get within a reasonable amount of time for a free trial to get as many benefits as possible. So within that 2 weeks, we wanted people to be better off, and that's just a blessing to them if they subscribe or not. That's up to them. And, of course, we don't make it automatic. You have to work at it to actually subscribe. But what we've seen in, some of the other research, which is going, is that 3 months time frame is when things really start to kick in with FLFE, being in a high consciousness field and energized nutrients and some of these other things that take a longer time. That 3 months is where we believed, it was starting to take off even greater in terms of benefits. And so this research shows that clearly, that, all this preliminary phase 1, we'd be careful to draw too many conclusions and paint it too broadly across everyone. But I found that interesting, that the less than 3 months is where the perceived benefits were less. And
if I could say something that you have reiterated over and over, as does Clayton, is that the philosophy of radical empiricism, which I'm going to thank William James for, I love that phrase. To have integrity means not only do you follow the data wherever it takes you, but you share whatever the results are. And it's the commitment to sharing the evidence, whatever the surprises are. It's always nice if they're more positive than negative, but the true commitment to being a seeker is in pursuing the evidence and going where truth takes us. Mm-hmm. And FLFE has that as a framework. How many companies do we know have that kind of philosophy? I don't know too many.
Yeah, someone in the chat said that they felt that FLFE was helpful in terms of the past, clearing the past for us. And that makes sense for both maybe the forgiveness and the negative to positive. You were going to say something, Clayton.
Well, when I was a kid, we used to play with Mexican jumping beans. You guys remember those? I think I'm dating myself.
God, yes, you are dating yourself. I haven't thought about Mexican jumping beans in many, many, many years.
My mind feels like a Mexican jumping bean. Just going, oh, how about this? How about that? How about this? I wonder what this means. Well, I'll share something that I think might be relative to most of us that are on this call. I don't go to many research meetings, I think very, very few, in fact. But I know that in our planning of this, the part that I've been involved in the creation of the high consciousness field, our prayer at the beginning of the meeting, 99% of the time anyway, when we remember to do it, is that we would ask divinity to know the truth and help us have the courage to follow the data wherever it may lead. And it's not always easy to find courage. And I find it helps to put that out in front of me and ask for it and have a group of people such as Gary and Lewis and Paule and Maria and Jeff to work with, where we can humble ourselves to something, some greater source of knowledge than us, and recognize that we struggle with courage to follow data wherever it leads. I remember when we did the Emoto research, Jeff, we had all these images. There was dozens and dozens. And typically people just pick the best image, and put it up on the website. And when we were testing what was in the highest and best interest of all, we got told that, or our conclusion to that was, when I say we got told, that it's really the data kind of tells you from kinesiology anyway, that you don't just share the best data that you have to make you look the best. You share a representative view of the data that comes in, because otherwise it's not integrous. So, so it's great to be in a space where we are able to have this agreement between us, and it doesn't come by accident, and it's not easy. So, and just reminds me like how much we need each other as humans. It's been a pretty isolating time the last couple of years, and there's times when we don't have the strength ourselves to do things, and we have those people around us to kind of bolster us up. And it's okay. That's the agreement. And so I guess we got to stick to it.
Yeah, you might as well.
Stick to it now. Yeah. So that was one Mexican jumping bean, and one of the other ones was. We have talked about this, of course, in our little groups, but it just makes me more curious how we could correlate this to either other high consciousness experiments that have been going on for time immemorial at every sacred pilgrimage site on the planet. And that's what excites me about this, is the correlation to other places around the world. And it excites me to be part of a possibility of how we could take this standardization of the ability to gather data on high consciousness fields and perhaps share it and help other places explore how to gather data for them in a way that could help people recognize that there are places on the planet that are miraculous. Something happens there, if you want to call that miraculous. So, yeah.
Who is the person that said a miracle is something that you don't believe is possible, but it happens anyway?
Well, that's, you could say FLFE falls in that category, and that people don't necessarily understand how it works. And if you look to mainstream science, they would say it doesn't work or it couldn't work. But we've got this quantum connection that's occurring with the technology and to the homes and businesses and around the cell phone. And we get these benefits, we get these results. And it is, and they're happening. So it's like this frontier research where the results are leading the theory, and the proven theory, or in science seems to be just the extension of an existing theory by a small amount. And unless you have a theory, there's, it falls in the miracle category. But so someone just said miracles are always there. It's just up to us to perceive them. And it almost falls in the synchronicity category too, of divine talking to us if we're paying attention. And anyway, those all kind of fit together. And my own jumping bean was around the meditation too. The deeper meditation was in the top 3 to 4, I think, in all categories.
Yes.
Of expectation. And that's one from the beginning. For me, that was one of the most intense differences in the FLFE environment, was that ability to really quiet the mind and drop in. And we've talked about that a lot on webinars as well in the past. And there it is right at the top. So it's great. It's great. It's very confirming to see the things that we've noticed personally and that we've heard in talking to customers and people, say over and over, but to see the numbers like that is really.
By the way, you just triggered a ridiculous thought. And between the two of you, it's a totally ridiculous thought. And I'm saying this, I think, partly in honor of Miles, because I think he'd enjoy this based on my knowledge of Miles. But since you brought up jumping bean, Mexican jumping, and I was thinking about, and they jump. And I was wondering if in an FLFE field that's promoting, all the things that FLFE, do Mexican beans spontaneously jump more? And that's actually research that you can do, and you can just measure the jumping, spontaneous jumping, and there you are.
Well, we'll have to.
So you see, we translated.
You could do jumps per minute, height of jumps, and number of jumps.
Height of jumps, number of jumps. You're right, absolutely.
Well, to control for temperature and humidity, though.
Absolutely,
so. Yes. Wow, that's put it on the list. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's great to be on the call, and with the two of you, and to talk through this, but we have a hand up. We could see if Michelle would like to still come in and talk to us. Does it sound good, guys?
Yeah. Is there an invitation to ask you questions about this data, Gary? Is that okay with you if people want to dig in a little more?
As long as I can pass the questions on to you two. No, but I'm happy, of course.
And then we'll hit the Q&A too, because there's a few questions in there.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. So Michelle, if you're still there, welcome to join us. You may have to unmute yourself, which is down at the bottom left usually.
Yes, we see a face.
She may have moved on. She's still muted. Okay. Well, since there's no more hands up right now, we'll go to the Q&A. I have to get my glasses on for that.
Take my glasses off. Or put my other glasses on.
We're a good team, Clayton.
Yeah. As long as one of us can see it.
I'm going to go to the end to see if there's things related to the presentation. Mm-hmm. So I've got an anonymous said, do you present this questionnaire at the beginning of the service prior to use? The same list of questions with number rating, perhaps. As someone with chronic illness, I notice how symptoms that heal or minimize, I can forget the pain I was in when it's gone. It would be really great to have a list of symptoms and such to compare to after the 3, 6, 12 months of service.
Yep. Well, first of all, I want to thank Anonymous for that question. And secondly, that is one of the next steps of doing a phase 1 study, now that we've done a retrospective study, you want to do a quote prospective, which means you want to get this information before people start the service and then be able to track it as it goes along. Mm-hmm. And if one is focusing on medical effects, for example, as opposed to other kinds of effects, you would want to hone in on the kinds of questions that mm-hmm. both pre and post that you would ask. If this were to be a phase 2 kind of research, which will happen at some point, then we would compare this to a waiting list control, or we would compare it to other comparisons to be able to try to understand what's relevant or what's important to quote, why and how FLFE is associated with what it does. And I know, Clayton, I can't remember whether you accused me personally or you just blamed my mind, but you said that I was like a soup.
Yes.
Different combinations. But FLFE is sort of like a soup too, meaning it has multiple factors which have to be all mixed properly and combined properly in order for the optimal conditions mm-hmm. To occur. So, but it's a very good question that I'm glad that person asked that.
And we have the EMF sensitives research, which will be pre and post. I mean, we've done the pre and post is, I think, 3 months later. So that's one that will have that, and that it's a good point. And it's interesting about the soup. It's one of the things that we've talked about, and probably way back in very early ones. In Clayton's work, the critical factor was, the thing that you can change to have the greatest change, right? It may be to take the smallest amount of energy to have the largest effect.
Right. Interesting. Right.
So since our focus is consciousness, is the evolution of consciousness and supporting that with the service, one of the early things we saw is that there are some physical aspects of the body that can slow down the evolution of consciousness. And so that was one of the early programs that we did, was supporting and we don't make medical claims, but supporting the liver and kidneys through basically energetic support. It's like a 24/7 prayer for your kidneys and 24/7 prayer for your liver. And because that supporting those organs to work better through our own innate intelligence, doing the healing, doing the work, doing the upgrades, that then it frees the body to heal and to evolve in consciousness, because the physical, I tend to think of evolving in consciousness as just consciousness and not physical, but there seems to be, neural changes, body changes, physical changes that happen. And if you don't have the filtering capacity, then the body doesn't do those things. So it's kind of part of the soup there is supporting the body to be optimal for the evolution of consciousness.
Yeah, it's the liver, kidney, gallbladders, and the GI tract almost at the same time, because the body needs to filter toxins better and eliminate them typically quicker. Faster isn't always better, but there is a way to measure your transit time, we'll call it, and that's the amount of time that it takes something to go through your GI tract. And we did experiments with this in the beginning. We sort of use an unsophisticated test called the beat test.
What?
The beat test. You ever heard of the beat test?
The BEE test?
Yes.
No, really? BEE?
Yeah, you eat beets.
Oh, beets.
Yes.
Oh, cool. The really beat test. I was making a synchronicity joke for Paula. B test. And you're now bringing up beets test. Okay, please, I'm listening. Real beets.
You eat a beet test, and then you pay attention to your bowel movements, and that tells you how long your transit time is, and how there's the duration of it, and then there's the frequency of bowel movements and things like that. So It may not have been double-blind longitudinal study, but it was a place to start.
You always start phase one.
Right.
People have to be comfortable starting. You start at the beginning, you do the phase one. That's what triggers ideas, gets the jumpy beans going, and then you do the more sophisticated ones as you go along.
Yep. Yeah, and so what we saw was going from a longer transit time, which was not optimal, to a more optimal transit time with that program in place.
Wow,
in a small sample of one or maybe two. But I don't know if you had other people in your family do that as well, Clayton, but that was
we tried to enroll a few friends as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, made for great dinner conversations. Dinner party conversations.
Over beats. Right.
Over beats. Yes. Class to beats. We also did, I did 14 liver, kidney, gallbladder flushes according to the protocols in in Andreas Moritz's book, The Amazing Liver, Kidney, Gallbladder Flush. And Jeff, you did a number of those, and you took Stonebreaker for about a year as well, which is a herb that dissolves deposits in the liver, kidney, and gallbladder. So we did lots of personal experiments. We typically we do everything on ourselves first, Gary. I mean, we figure we test it in many, many different ways, and then we test it on ourselves when we get to the point where it's passed all the other standards. And then we have different layers of beta testing in our communities that we roll out through.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for Gary. I think it came from Joe, it looks like. Gary, can you expand on conclusion number 4? Although I know FLFE is not a placebo from personal experience, it's not clear to me why the data could not be explained away as a placebo effect. Wouldn't the only way to be sure is a double-blind study? ? I want to make sure we present 100% accurate conclusions. Evidence points to no placebo, but is it really a conclusion or proof?
Boy, that is a great question. The answer is that in order to evaluate a placebo effect, you need a double-blind protocol in order to be a definitively. Plus, you need to also assess people's expectations or beliefs prior to. So it's not enough just to do a double-blind experiment, but if you want to do it completely, you would want to get both the self-report measure and the double-blind paradigm. What's novel about what we've done in this study, what we discovered, and I call it really is a discovery accidentally, is that you can use the extent to which things fit or do not fit one's expectancies. Expectancy for benefit becomes a way to infer whether something's a placebo effect without having definitive proof. Again, in a phase 1 study, you collect data, you say, does it work? And you also generate hypotheses for future research. And so I would agree with in fact, again, making this clearer, if it's Jill or whoever this person was.
Joe, yeah.
Joe. Okay, I want to thank Joe for that because it's really important. It's very difficult to explain all of these effects as placebo effects if people are surprised and substantially surprised and the benefits are so high. Because it's hard to explain those data as being, quote, a pre-expectancy effect because that doesn't allow for the surprise hypothesis. So it's the surprise element that points to the idea that it's not a placebo effect. The way you confirm it is a phase 2 double-blind experiment. So that's the way I would clarify it. These data point to the conclusion. These data do not support the idea that it's a placebo effect, but they do not prove that it's more than placebo. Again, that you would need the double-blind. That's why we do more research. And what is research? Re-search. research again and again.
Yep. That's great. Yeah. Thank you, Joe, for that. Let's see what other questions related to the presentation we could find here.
I have one about the gallbladder. Why don't I answer that one, Jeff, while we're looking for more, because that seems like a fairly urgent. So Eleni was saying, I need to have my gallbladder removed next month due to pain of gallstones. Will FLFE assist with quick healing? Well, we don't make any medical claims, Eleni. If you're not on the service, we do suggest you do at least the free trial. When I started doing the liver, kidney, gallbladder flushes, I was having severe gallbladder pain, and apparently my gallbladder, as best as we could assess it, was about 85% full of stones, which is not uncommon. Now, the book, The Amazing Liver, Kidney, Gallbladder The Amazing Liver, Kidney, Gallbladder Flush by Andreas Moritz, is the best way of dealing with gallbladder deposits that I have found, other than the product called Stonebreaker, which is a number of herbs. It's a brand of product. So I would encourage you to read Andreas Moritz's book. What he does differently than the Helga Clark liver, kidney, gallbladder flush is he suggests you take malic acid for a week before you do the flush. Now, the malic acid softens the outsides of the stones so that they can pass more easily through the ducts. I found that the average flush took between 3 and 5% by volume of stones out of my liver, kidney, and gallbladder. And I don't want to get into the ways of measuring that here, but you will notice, if you read in his book, different ways of assessing what's coming out of you. And if you're going to have your gallbladder removed, you may want to do a flush and see if at least it reduces the pain. And if you have one successful flush with some reduction in pain, then you can continue until all of the stones are gone, which you can tell if there's no stones coming out after the last flush. And there's ways you can measure that. I don't want to get it. We've had enough bowel movement conversations for one meeting, but I would encourage you to do that. I think I would have had to have my gallbladder removed as well. And I don't think nature puts gallbladders in our bodies by accident. I think they're necessary. So I just wanted to address that because that could help Eleni's health significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we highly recommend reading the book and, of course, checking with your health professional.
Yes,
at all times before doing anything. So we have another question from Laura Roy saying, I wonder how many questionnaire respondents were longer term, like my husband and I, almost 5 years on FLFE. We remember only the 2 very dramatic, significant changes, but not the subtle changes. It seems like that could skew your results if there were many long-termers in the study. She's wondering about that. Thank you.
Okay. You'll have to forgive me for not remembering the ends for every group. I have to go back and look at prior slides and stuff. But I think my memory is that there were like 30 people in that group. I mean, it was actually a relatively small group compared to the 338. So even though it might have, quote, skewed that, it wouldn't have skewed it that much. But now that she's mentioned that, these are the kinds of questions that lead you to then want to look at the data more closely. I mean, think about how much data we looked at already. But then there are these pearls and they're waiting to be discovered. And that's something I think we should look at more finely. So I want to thank her for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Laura. So let's see. Do you want me to read a few more, Clayton?
I think it's worth mentioning that many people, we get so acclimatized to the high consciousness field that I don't know if you called it acclimatization. I think you called it something else, Gary. We get used to it.
Yeah,
we adapt.
We adapt, habituate, yes.
Adapt. For myself, I've been in this field now, as you know, and it is evolving, of course, all the time as we add new programs and more resources. But since primarily about 2007, and the times I notice it the most are when I travel and the service isn't on the building where I'm going to. I really notice it, and then I notice it when we put that building on, like we're staying in a hotel or an Airbnb or something like that. I really notice it then. And then every once in a while I turn it off and it's like, wow. So for those of you who are long timers like Laura or myself and Jeff, you can always turn it off for a little while. But we actually have a large kind of spike in people who sign up for the service after the free trial runs out, and it's a day or two and they're not sure what's changed. And they figure out that what's changed is that the service is no longer on. They get an email from us and they call back in and they turn it on, and it's like, wow, okay. I kind of knew I had it on, but I just got busy and forgot about it. So that's worth saying, I think, probably once in a while. Is just, you can always turn it off. Of course you can. And you do have in your control panel, once your property's been tested, a slider to slide the level of consciousness up and down, and an on-off button to turn the EMF mitigation on and off. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to give you more and more tools to help you be your own consciousness researcher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we should talk to you about that one day, Gary. We'll go through the control panel with you and we'll sort of imagine what else we could give people access to that would help them with their experience. That might be an interesting thought.
Another jumping bean. That's a good one too.
Yeah,
I could have a whole bunch of. But seriously, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
So we have a comment from Joseph. This could be a question for the next survey. Joseph's saying, we've had the service for over 5 years. I'm 69 years old and have worn glasses my entire life, nearsighted. And they're required on my license for driving. So my eyesight has improved to the point that I don't need my glasses anymore, even driving.
Wow.
Question, are you seeing results like this, these physical results for others? So, I mean, if anyone in the chat would like to, chime in about your eyesight, that would be interesting. Of course, I've got my glasses, 2 of us have glasses on
Yes.
here. But,
and I had cataract surgery, so that doesn't count either. But
really, my reading glasses have gone down in number, even though I'm getting, of course, getting older. So I'm using less, and I don't really need them, but I don't like squinting, in this to read this. But so anyway, that would be maybe could be an interesting pre and post.
Boy, I love that question. In fact, that's what we have. It's really important when people ask these things, because when you start with phase 1 research, you have to start with one. Some person has to observe some effect. Mm-hmm. And then you look to see if there's 2, and then you look to see if there's 3. And when you start accumulating enough, quote, instances or spontaneous cases, that's when you would then want to formalize the official phase 1 research. And that is the history, I think, of FLFE. FLFE is an evidence-based company driven by observation and experience, and then replication of that experience. So it's very much evidence-based. And I use the term self-science for that term. Remember, boring scientist, so I tend to put in its kind of jargon. But I see self-science as applying the tools of the scientific method to the laboratories of our personal lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you guys do that naturally. I mean, you sort of can't help yourself. And I think that's something that FLFE fosters, and it's something that it also could further nurture in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, developing consciousness researchers, a whole community of people that can do research, and that's why I love the idea of more tools.
Yeah,
and we've been talking about more boosts or higher consciousness boosts. So we could also perhaps do some research around that. So Michelle's asking, can too much high frequency energy be detrimental to a body? And just want to make the distinction, Michelle, that FLFE is high consciousness field. It's not a high frequency field. So we don't use frequency, even though there may be some underlying frequency that's part of all of creation. We're activating a consciousness field. So it's different from a high frequency energy, which would be a high oscillation waveform of some kind. It's not the FLFE environment. Did you want to say more about that, Clayton?
Yes, it's an interesting conversation. It's where when you get into a very specific line of study, your language becomes critical. And it's very easy to use different words interchangeably. And in our day-to-day conversations, it's not really a problem. But in very specific studies, a lot of the education that's involved in those studies is about the appropriateness of language that is used in a certain context. And so in our very specialized area, the difference between frequency and field is quite significant. And in the beginning, we were looking for metaphors to use to explain FLFE. And we use the metaphor of a radio tower sending out a signal, which would infer it was a type of frequency. And so we've refined our metaphors over time. And we've actually found a way to measure our metaphors, Gary, in certain things, because it is critical that we communicate as clearly as we can the exact language that will help people understand the service the most. So the best metaphor that we've come up with is drawing an analogy between FLFE and human prayer, where you hold someone in mind, and that is creating a unique identifier, which is in the technology. It goes into for those of you who've heard us describe the machines, there's an output stack at the bottom of the machine where the high consciousness area is created. And there's a quantum association between that area with all of the information in it and the unique identifier that you give us in the database, which is your address or a cell phone number or a picture of an object. So that unique identifier that's held in the high consciousness field or inserted into the high consciousness field in the machine, the FLFE system, as we call it, is the same as you holding a friend in mind that you're praying for or sending a positive thought to. And oftentimes, not oftentimes, maybe for people who are very much aware of synchronicities, I don't know anybody that hasn't thought of somebody, at least in my age group anyway, we've been around a few years, and then that friend hasn't called them, right? It's like, so the odds of that happening, you're thinking of somebody and the phone rings while you're thinking of them. After a certain amount of time, I would imagine there's a way to measure the statistical probability of that happening, Gary.
There is.
And so that's just a little bit of a context on the difference between high consciousness field and frequency. And in our little world, it's, that is a pretty big deal. So we don't expect everybody to be as picky about it as us. It's just that when we're explaining it, we need to be really pristine in our language. And I do notice another hand up, Jeff.
I've got one more related to the study in here, and then, so it's from NANZ, N-A-N-Z. Do you think that the participants that the results are based on could be affected by enthusiasm for FLFE? For instance, I do not recall seeing an opportunity to participate, but I rarely go on the FLFE Facebook page or the website. I like your results, but would be interested to see results from people that are not users of the Facebook page or FLFE website. If next time, make the net broader. One point I did confirm with Maria, we sent this out in emails to everybody as well. So we did cast the net. It's just, everyone's busy and not everyone has time to see all their emails. So there was definitely an email invitation to participate in the study as well. And, what we can also try to do is maybe in the webinars, we could when we're ready to do the next study, we could announce it, watch for an email, some other ways to kind of alert people that it's coming. So yeah, we would recommend you watch the newsletter that comes from us and watch for the next study because it will come in email as well. But what do you think about that? The results could be affected by enthusiasm for FLFE, that part of the question, Gary.
I think that has to be the case. And that applies to every survey that's ever done where people are allowed to volunteer as to whether or not they participate or not. You are always dealing with a subset of people who are motivated enough to answer. The fact that we received information from people who are enthusiastic enough to tell us that the service was less than they expected and that they did not observe, many benefits, minimal or no benefits, is telling us that the results are not just simply only enthusiastic people were participating in the survey. It's in terms of explaining the positive results. But enthusiasm for caring about FLFE and wanting to be heard, yes, I think that's important. I think also, though, that one's enthusiasm for anything is part of the soup that allows something to work. You've heard the phrase, if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. But the reverse is also true, as Yogi Berra put it, and I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. Yeah. Meaning that if you weren't willing to look and if you weren't open-hearted to see it, you wouldn't even have the experience. People won't notice synchronicities or notice miracles or notice anything unless they're willing to be open and to seek it in a positive way. So that part of this can actually be part of the process that enables something to happen.
Yeah, part of our intent with FLFE is to create enough goodwill within the community for people to take the effort to let us know what their experience is.
Yes.
And
positive and negative.
Whatever it
is.
Whatever
exactly.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Well, we were on 2 hours here. It went fast. It was so much fun. So I think it might be a good idea to wrap it up. I don't see any hands up.
There's one.
There's one. Up. Matt, should we bring Matt in as our
closing hand?
Yeah.
Hello, Matt. We're unmuting you. So welcome.
Good day, gentlemen. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing good.
We're having fun.
So I'm a part of a little group. We have a global platform where we share actual truth news, if there's such a thing, right? But we were gifted with your guys's product, and this week, with just like with anything we're considering affiliating with or whatnot, I sent this out to probably about 20 people. All different, from my folks who are 77 years old and very toxic, all the way up to people who are the cleanest, most purest people that can be found. And everybody no one can say that they haven't, everybody is happy. And I'm very familiar with like electromagnetic frequency emitters, and we've had many different scalar things. The gentleman that actually brought us to or showed us you has like 3 or 4 different scalar device, all types of devices and everything else, and other healing modalities. And I'm very blown away. I'm very blown away at what at the results. I have never seen anything like it. And everything we deal with is suppressed healing modalities. everything. And so, and I'm in the country here. We have the nature, and it's so funny because I've seen all the data that Gary put forward, and before today, I've been telling everybody the birds are louder. I have more deer that are coming up.
Birds are louder.
Everything's gotten greener, and my communication level with my partner, has definitely improved. My plants are sticking up higher. We're in a little camper and they're sticking up higher than they ever. I think my plants are smiling at me. And when it was raining outside, coming down real hard, me and my girl, and we have a little baby, when we're pregnant again. I got boys from 25 years old all the way down. But anyways, wow. We stepped out into the rain and we were sitting in the grass and we were crying. We're like, I could tell that the water was happy, And so kudos to you guys so much. We are totally excited. There's a couple different people that are in the inner core group of our platform. We have a huge platform. We expect to have about 20 million people in about a year. So, and they're all truthers. They're all people that are really, I should more or less say consciousness journeymen, people on a consciousness awareness journey, So, and I'm just, I'm really happy that this day has come, that we've really found something that this affected, because, this is not deniable. No one I've talked to can even come. Everybody feels, I still feel it's been like 10 days. My beginning LOC number, they said, was in the top 99%. Now, again, we don't have neighbors right by us, and we're purists. We really are, like, and I know probably more about quantum physics than anybody you've probably talked to before. I mean, that's my passion. That's my total life and obsession. We have torsion fields all over my property, all kinds of stuff. But anyways, our LOC numbers start off above 560, they said, but I feel this so much, and on an emotional kind of just consciousness, the way everything has come alive. Everything has come alive. I've had now I have a lot of synchronicities. They're like constant in my life. They really are. But and I recognize them because I'm always looking for it. That kind of live in the here and now, and I let my life guide me that way. And my synchronicities have gotten so crazy. It's I'm still mind blown. So we're gonna get.
Matt, Are they moving into super synchronicities? Have you read Gary's book yet? Yeah. Is that more than
I haven't. I'm a little green to this whole thing. I haven't even looked over your guys' information like I need to yet. We're literally I felt the benefits, and after 2 days I started doing what I normally do when we have something like this come up, and we want to take a look at it. I got everybody that knows our cause involved and feeling it on a trial. Even my 16-year-old son down in 2 states away, everybody, all the people that own the platform, they're all on it. They're all like loving it. One guy bike rides like 60 miles a day, and he's very much aware of, there's other scalar companies, I guess, along this kind of line. I don't know if you guys say you're scalar or not, but I've spent $300 a month for like a year or a couple years ago on it. And this right here is the absolute real deal. Wow. I cannot wait to do everything I can to get this to everybody, because, all of us raising our level of consciousness, that's what it's all about.
Yep. That's how we move forward.
That's right. We're about fighting a good fight. Our mission's about changing this earth and making it a better place. And that's the only thing that drives us. And that's our lighthouse. And, we're going to take this, what you guys got, and we're going to do the very best we can with it. So.
Wow. That's exciting, Matt.
Yep.
We're on the same page. It's our lighthouse too.
That's right.
Support evolution.
That's right. We have think tank shows. We have speak up shows. We have daily news, which it's not like news that you've ever seen anywhere. I mean, it's quite aggressive news because, there's people out there trying to, the world's a crazy place, right? So, but we run our commercials, and we're going to be, if you guys don't have commercials for us, I think I've already emailed Maria, but as soon as we But whatever we got to do to start getting this going is what we're going to be doing. We'll be all over this. So
Great.
and I'm just
looking forward to talking to you more about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
We received your email about the referral partner opportunity. We ran some numbers, and we have you on our list to call. So
awesome. Yeah. And reach out to me. Yeah. And I'll send her another email. I think I did put my phone number on there and stuff, but we'll get this going. I don't want to take up anybody else's time, since I know we're late into the game, but just wanted to say hi to you guys. And we really look forward. I'm more excited about this than I have been about anything before.
Wow.
So,
well, that's great. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Yes, sir. You guys have a great day. Seriously.
Yeah.
Bless you, Matt.
Sure will.
Love this energy too, by the way. How can you not feel it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Say, hey, Matt, you've got lots of children, right?
Oh yeah. I got nothing but boys from 25 all the way down.
So
and one on the way.
So here's another research experiment question, Gary. One of the things we hear anecdotally is that teenagers and younger kids start cleaning when they never cleaned before, like cleaning their rooms. I know. Have you noticed that, Matt?
My 16-year-old's about 2 states away. So I only have a 1.5-year-old boy here, and my other kids are already flew the coop because I'm 43. I started having kids at 17.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my gosh, hey, I'll tell you this. I'm glad I'm not here. My partner, Laura, she's not known. She's not world famous for cleaning. And she's been cleaning a lot more than I've ever seen her clean. I will say that. So not my kids, but I'm thinking of now that's between us and the fence post, right? But yeah, awesome. She's been, yeah. It's organization and yes. It's awesome. Everything you guys actually went over and things to look for with the plants and the nature and everything. All this was the stuff. The guy that brought us to us, I had been telling him this all week. I know he's listening to this call, so he was probably just laughing when you guys were bringing it up because that's all the stuff I've been telling him this week.
That's great, Matt. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you guys for your service for what we're all doing here. Seriously.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I have not overstayed my welcome, but I was supposed to transform into another being at 11 o'clock, and it's now 11:11, which of course is a very special number for me. But I was wondering whether or not, at least in terms of my participation, if I could.
Sure, Gary. Yeah, that's probably 11:11. Good time to close, and yeah, we can say goodbye and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
It is my pleasure, and the journey continues.
The journey continues.
Bye.
Any closing words, Clayton?
Well, I haven't had a moment to gather my thought. I'm just so charged up by Matt. The guy's like an Energizer bunny.
I know. It's awesome.
He's got the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. It's really great to have him see a sample of 20 people all seeing the same benefits we reported here in this data. So I don't know if it's all, but he's saying enthusiastically that he was seeing these benefits. So I guess I'll start. Really grateful for all the subscribers. I mean, it's really you, the subscriber, that's allowing us to do this research, to do the research that we do to improve the service with new programs. And it often comes from you and your comments and things you're noticing. And your subscription, payments are helping to pay this research team and to buy the equipment that we need and to go outside to others to help us with research. And it's certainly dear to my heart to continue to evolve FLFE and to evolve our understanding of consciousness fields, and the nature the nature of reality in general. And that's what we're excited to do in the research department. So it's great to have Gary with us, and to so you could you all can get a taste of what we're doing.
Yes. In our prayers in the office, we often thank all of you subscribers and all the people in the community for the support. I mean, spending your money is a real form of support, and without that, we couldn't pay the salaries and hire people that, not many people can afford to work for free. For me, I just want to thank the research team. I'm not involved in it as because I have another focus in my role, but I just wanted to acknowledge Maria Colamy, who's managing the chat, for her excellent layout of data and her commitment to the mission. And Paulay now is the research coordinator. She's coordinating the team. And Gary, who is Gary is a multi-degree professional with decades of, I won't say how many decades of experience, and is now at the University of Arizona conducting research on consciousness and other interesting topics. And Lewis, who is really a specialist in helping emerging technologies bring themselves to the market and be of service to the world. And that's his profession. So it's taken a long time to gather the team together that can support this type of research. And I believe there's going to be a lot more coming out. It just takes so long to get people and resources in place, and to get the feel between the people, if you want to use the woo-woo language, and the credentials, and just the capacity to do this kind of work. And I think we're just getting started, Jeff. And that's exciting to me, that we're just getting started. And I really would like to see some of the sacred sites on the planet, the pilgrimage sites that humans have gone to for time immemorial, to be supported to have the same type of data gathering and sharing of data that we've been able to do today. That's a vision I'm holding in mind. So I invite the rest of you to hold that with me if you feel that's near and dear to your heart. It does help us in the West, or our Western minds, or highly educated intellects, to connect with divinity. At least I believe that it does, when we have data to support the experience. And so for me, good science and good data is a form of spiritual expression. I think those are my final words.
Yes, we're going to the next level, as it's been one of our catchphrases, is because we keep going to the next level. It's not an empty statement. So thank you to everyone that joined us here today and in the future. With that, we're out. Thank you so much for being here for this live recorded episode with Dr. Gary Schwartz. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the experimental evidence, resources, and the meditation. You don't want to miss the meditation. It was a good one.
Thanks for joining this episode of Fields of Consciousness, the podcast of consciousness conversations. We invite you to visit the link below the episode to experience a no credit card free trial of Focused Life Force Energy, high conscious environment for 15 days.
Yeah, after seeing all this research about the effects of FLFE and high consciousness environment, I think you might really enjoy the free trial if you haven't ever tested it. So the link is below. And if you like, you can subscribe to the Fields of Consciousness podcast, and please tune in next time. We release new episodes every other week on Tuesdays at 11:11 a.m. PST. Onward and upward.